You have a version of yourself that you carry into every room. The competent parent, the experienced manager, the adult who has figured out enough of life to be trusted with guiding someone who hasn't. You walk into the room with that version of yourself fully assembled, and you are certain in the way you are certain about very few things, that the Gen Z person in front of you can see it, that they register it, that they understand on some level who you are and what you represent. Here is what nobody tells you. They don't see that version of you at all. Not because they are ungrateful, not because they are disrespectful, not because the version of yourself you're presenting isn't real, but because the human brain, particularly the brain of a young person whose neural architecture was shaped by a set of environmental conditions you did not grow up inside, does not process authority figures through the same perceptual lens you assume it does. Before you have said a single word, before you have demonstrated your experience or your wisdom or your care, their brain has already processed you, categorized you, and the category it placed you in has almost nothing to do with your resume, your intentions, or the version of yourself you walked in carrying. Here is what they actually see, and once you understand it, you will not be able to unsee the gap between what you think you are projecting and what is actually being received. The first thing they see: a mirror. Before they see you as a parent, a manager, or an authority figure, they see themselves. This is not a figure of speech. This is the documented function of what developmental psychologists call the reflected sense of self. Research by sociologist Charles Cooley, later extended through decades of attachment theory and developmental psychology, established that a young person's sense of their own worth, competence, and right to exist fully in the world is formed primarily through the reflected appraisal of the people who hold authority over them. They do not build their self-concept from the inside out. They build it from the outside in. What this means in practice is devastating in its simplicity. When you look at your Gen Z child or employee, whatever is on your face and in your tone in that moment becomes data that their brain uses to answer the question, "Am I enough?" Not consciously, not as a deliberate interpretation. It happens in the 3 seconds before either of you has said anything. Your slight disappointment becomes their slight inadequacy. Your distracted attention becomes their unimportance. Your genuine pride becomes the closest they will get, in that moment, to feeling like they are allowed to take up their full amount of space. They are not looking at you, they are looking at themselves in you. And what they see there, repeated across thousands of ordinary interactions across years, assembles into the internal structure of how they understand their own value. Here is what most people don't realize. You are not just in a conversation with them. You are participating in the ongoing construction of who they believe themselves to be. That is the actual weight of the role. And most people carrying it have no idea it is in their hands. The second thing they see: a weather system. They do not read your words first, they read your atmosphere. Science has now confirmed what every child has always known intuitively. The human nervous system processes non-verbal signals, facial micro-expressions, vocal tone, body posture, and the speed of response, hundreds of milliseconds before it processes the semantic content of language. Dr. Albert Mehrabian's foundational research on communication established that when emotional content is being conveyed, 55% of the message is carried by body language, 38% by tone of voice, and only 7% by the actual words. The words are almost irrelevant. The atmosphere is everything. For Gen Z, whose threat detection systems were calibrated inside environments of high ambient uncertainty, this atmospheric reading is not just present, it is hyperacute. They have spent years learning to read the tension in a jaw before it becomes a sentence, the quality of a pause before an answer, the fraction of a second difference between a smile that reaches the eyes and one that doesn't. They walk into your room and the first thing they do, faster than consciousness, is read the weather. Is it safe today? Is there a front moving in? Should I say the thing I was going to say, or should I wait for a better window? Is this person okay, or are they running at a deficit that means anything I need will cost too much to ask for right now? This is why you can say all the right things in the wrong atmosphere and have them land as nothing. The words said, "I'm interested in what you have to say." The atmosphere said, "I'm distracted and slightly pressured and could use this conversation to end quickly." Their nervous system received the atmosphere. Their response was calibrated to that, and you walked away wondering why they didn't open up. The third thing. They see a data set. They are collecting evidence. Every interaction with you is a data point in an ongoing study whose research question is this world safe enough for me to invest in it? This sounds abstract until you understand what the data set is actually being used for. Behavioral economist Daniel Kahneman's research on how humans make decisions under uncertainty established that the brain builds predictive models of the environments it inhabits. It does not evaluate each new situation from scratch. It consults the pattern established by previous situations and issues a prediction, based on what has happened before, what is likely to happen now. Your Gen Z person has been running this model on you for years, maybe their whole life. The model contains every time you said something would happen and it did. Every time you said something would happen and it didn't. Every time you asked how they were and actually listened to the answer. Every time you asked and your eyes were somewhere else. Every time you got it wrong and repaired it. Every time you got it wrong and never mentioned it again. The model issues a prediction about you before every interaction, and that prediction determines how much of themselves they bring into the room. Not because they are strategic or guarded in a calculating way, but because the nervous system conserves its most vulnerable resources for the environments where the data says it is safe to spend them. Here is the hardest part of this. The model was largely built before either of you was old enough to understand it was being built. It was built in the small, unremarkable moments. The bedtime conversation you remember differently than they do. The tone you used on a difficult day that you have completely forgotten. The moment of repair that you thought was sufficient and they experienced as insufficient. You cannot delete the model, but you can add new data, and new data, accumulated consistently, rewrites predictions over time. The fourth thing they see, the standard. They are measuring themselves against something you are holding without knowing you're holding it. Every person in a position of authority over a young person is carrying, whether consciously or not, a set of expectations about who that person should become, how fast they should become it, and what version of success looks like when they get there. These expectations are rarely stated explicitly. They don't need to be. They leak. Through the questions you ask and the ones you don't. Through which achievements get the full response and which get the qualified one. Through what you talk about with pride when they're not in the room. Research in achievement motivation psychology, particularly the work of Carol Dweck and Wendy Grolnick on parental involvement and autonomy support, consistently shows that implicit performance expectations, the unspoken standards that a young person senses rather than hears, produce a specific and measurable psychological effect. The young person does not simply try to meet the standard. They internalize it as the threshold below which they do not deserve full approval. And when they consistently fall short of a threshold they were never explicitly told about, the result is not motivation to do better. It is a quiet, chronic sense of being perpetually behind. They see the standard, they have always seen it. What they have never had is a clear conversation about whether the standard was set for their life or for the life you imagined for them. So what do you do with all of this? With the knowledge that you are simultaneously a mirror, a weather system, a data set, and a standard, that they are reading all four of these dimensions simultaneously before you have finished your first sentence. The answer is not to become perfect. A perfect parent or manager does not exist, and the attempt to perform perfection is itself a form of inauthenticity that their nervous system will detect and flag. The answer is to become readable. To become a person whose emotional interior matches their exterior often enough that the gap between the two stops being a source of confusion or anxiety. To become a dataset that, when consulted, more often than not confirms. This is a safe place to bring the real thing. You do not have to be the mirror that shows them only their best self. You have to be the mirror that shows them an accurate self, seen with warmth. Not the weather system that is always calm, but the one that is honest about the storm and doesn't direct the storm at them. Not the data set with no negative entries, but the one with enough repair entries that the model learns. Even when things go wrong here, they get fixed. And the standard. The standard might need to be spoken out loud for the first time. What do you actually need from them? What does success genuinely look like in your mind? And more importantly, is that standard about them, or is it about you? Because the version of themselves that they are building in the reflection of you is the one they will carry for the rest of their lives, into every relationship, into every room, into the mirror they will one day hold up for someone else. You are not just in their life. You are in their architecture, and architecture, once built, does not easily forget its